Hey, what's up, guys? So, we've all fallen down the alt-right pipeline once or twice, right? One day you come across a Ben Shapiro feminists owned compilation, and the next day you suddenly find yourself with a tiki torch marching in Charlottesville. One day you're listening to this nice Jewish man explain to you why feminism is bad, and the next day you've suddenly shaved your head and now you hate Ben Shapiro. This is a joke. I have never fallen down the alt-right pipeline. Back in high school, I did watch a couple Ben Shapiro feminist-owned compilations, and I remember coming away from those videos thinking that, yeah, some of these BuzzFeed girl boss type feminists were kind of annoying, but I remember thinking to myself at the time, okay, maybe these specific feminists are annoying, but why would that mean that women in general shouldn't have equality? And so I was never convinced to turn against feminism, and that's about as far as I ever fell down the alt-right pipeline. I think it's pretty interesting how a lot of people talk about how Ben Shapiro is one of the people who sent them down the alt-right pipeline, because the end of the alt-right pipeline is the alt-right, where people are blatantly anti-Semitic. Hey, Ben Shapiro, how do you feel about the fact that you've been sending people down a pipeline to eventually hate you? That probably doesn't feel too good. I think recently Ben has been realizing just how much he fucked up, because he's been noticing how more and more young people keep turning to alt-right figures like Nick Fuentes. So now he's been trying to push back against Nick Fuentes and tell young people that they shouldn't be looking up to him, but basically everyone on the right is ignoring him. I guess when Ben was converting young people to the right, he was hoping they would become good neoconservatives who love capitalism and traditional values and bombing the Middle East and Israel. But recently, more and more young men seem to be moving past neoconservatism and past MAGA conservatism, and now they're embracing the far right. And I obviously think this is very bad. I would rather someone be a moderate conservative than a far right winger. However, I do think I understand why this is happening. When these young right-wing men start to see how incompetent Trump really is, they see how he's clearly trying to hide his associations with Epstein, they see how he claims to want to make America great again, but then he keeps acting like he's Putin and Netanyahu's bitch, and he keeps sending billions of dollars to Israel to keep bombing Gaza instead of spending that money on actually helping American citizens. So when these young men start waking up to how terrible Trump is, I understand why a lot of them are going, fuck this, and then they end up moving even further right. However, I have a proposition for these young right-wing men. Instead of moving further to the right, why not move to the left and become a woke soy boy cuck pussy like me? Again, I think it's great that a lot of young people are realizing how terrible Trump is, and I think it's great that people are realizing that we shouldn't be sending billions of dollars to Israel when they're trying to commit ethnic cleansing. But I don't think that the solution to young men's problems is to move to the far right and to become an anti-Semitic white identitarian who wants to force women back into the kitchen and make it illegal to be gay. Because how is any of this going to actually solve the problems that young men are facing? If young men are dealing with a loneliness epidemic, becoming an incel who wants to force women back into the kitchen is not going to help you find a girlfriend. Women are just generally not into that kind of stuff. Sure, maybe there are some base trad waifus out there, but generally women like to be able to have the choice to do whatever they want to do with their lives. And if young men are dealing with a cost of living crisis right now, why not support someone like Zoran Mamdani or Bernie, who wants to freeze your rent and give you health care? And if you really hate Israel, Zoran has said that we should arrest Netanyahu. That's pretty based, right? We can hold Israel accountable for their actions without becoming anti-Semites who blame all of society's problems on Jewish people. I think that sounds like a pretty fun idea. Anyway, in case you somehow don't know what the alt-right pipeline is, the idea is that you're brought into the pipeline with right-wing content that seems more innocent and innocuous, but then as you go down the pipeline, slowly the content gets more and more extreme until you realize that you've become alt-right or far-right or part of the dissident right. And there's also an alt-left pipeline, which starts with you watching John Oliver videos and ends with you throwing your landlord into a guillotine. The way that I've seen the alt-right pipeline functioning recently, especially on TikTok, is through the spreading of Agartha memes. I would just like to apologize in advance for the rest of this video. This is all going to be some fucking grade A distilled brain rot. So basically, according to some Nazis, Agartha is a city that exists in the center of the earth because the earth is actually hollow. And if you fly past the ice wall that exists in Antarctica, then you can descend into the center of the earth and get to Agartha, which is basically the promised land for Aryans. You know, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed white people that were a favorite of a certain mustache man. I've seen Agartha referred to as Wakanda for white people. If you ever watched the movie Black Panther and you found yourself really mad that all these black people were allowed to have their own civilization, well, now you can become a white panther and travel to Agartha. And of course, one of the main people who's trying to bring new recruits to Agartha is Agartha Kirk, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed version of Charlie Kirk.
Attention soldier, the Soys have successfully planted an improvised Soylent device, better known as an ISD.
I guess the idea is that after Charlie Kirk passed on from this life, he was resurrected by this man named Ashtar Sharon. Sheeran. I think this Ashtar guy is supposed to be like the king of Agartha. And if you drink Ashtar's Monster Energy drink, then you can turn into an Aryan. Agartha isn't real. Drink this, goy. And then Charlie Kirk drinks it and then turns into an Aryan. Now, Agartha Kirk is just one variant of Charlie Kirk that exists within the Agarthaverse. You also have the Kirkinator, which is, of course, Charlie Kirk as a Terminator. I think I definitely prefer the Kirkinator over Agartha Kirk, just because I think if Charlie Kirk was like about to die, it makes a lot more sense that he would be able to be turned into a robot than turned into a blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy. I guess the idea with the Kirkinator is he's kind of like Anakin from Star Wars Episode 3, where when he was about to die from being burned by lava, he was able to be brought back as Darth Vader. So I guess the Kirkinator is kind of like Darth Kirk. I've been noticing recently on TikTok that a lot of young people across the political spectrum have been making Charlie Kirk memes where they Photoshop Charlie Kirk's face onto a bunch of random different pictures. The fact that conservatives were threatening to get people fired from their jobs if they made fun of Charlie Kirk, of course, caused a bunch of people to want to make fun of Charlie Kirk. I think it's pretty much always been the case that the best way to get young people to joke about something is to tell them that they're not allowed to joke about it. And I think the reason a lot of far-right people have been making fun of Charlie Kirk is because he was known for being very outspokenly pro-Israel.
You know, it's funny, I used to say that, hey, if you as a gay person would go to Gaza, they'd throw you off of tall buildings, right? Now they don't have any tall buildings left, so I don't... Is that too soon? I'm sorry. Maybe you shouldn't kill Jews, stupid Muslims.
So they think it's funny to imagine him as a based, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel Aryan. Isn't it just so great that people like Charlie Kirk and Donald Trump being such obvious shills for Israel has caused a bunch of young men to turn into actual rabid anti-Semites? I'm not worried about society right now at all. To be clear, I think that most of the Agartha memes that people are sharing on TikTok are ironic. Most of these people don't literally believe that Agartha is a real place, and a lot of people who stumble across these memes just probably find them goofy and funny, and they don't understand all the far-right imagery that is attached to these memes. However, there definitely are a bunch of people who are sharing these memes in a meta-ironic way to try to funnel people towards the far right. This is exactly how pipelines work. You draw people in with memes and jokes and things that seem harmless, but then eventually you start asking them questions like, doesn't 6 million seem like an awfully big number to you? And as ironic and stupid as these memes are, people need to realize that a lot of the Nazis that these far-right people look up to actually believed in this stuff. They actually did believe in crazy shit like thinking that there are cities in the center of the earth. Can we go to Agartha? Agartha doesn't exist. So on the left you have two people who are popular in the looks maxing community. This dude's name is Cookie King, and apparently incel looks maxers think that this dude was like super attractive when he was in his prime. The thing I'll always find funny about looks maxing is that it's about like trying to find the most attractive possible man that you can find and then trying to get yourself to look like him. Isn't isn't it just like a little bit gay to spend all your time trying to find the most attractive man possible so you can look like him? Like, how do you know who the most attractive man is if you don't find men even like a little bit attractive? They would say it's not because they're gay, they're just observing objective criteria. We have determined the objective criteria which makes men hot and sexy and attractive and fuckable. On the right, we've got a Jewish Wojak saying that Agartha doesn't exist, and he's holding a juice box, which is a dog whistle for Jews. If you ever see someone posting the juice box emoji, they're referencing Jews because, like, juice sounds like Jews, you get it. And then look, the Jew explodes and now Ashtar Sharon is here to try to get you to drink his monster energy. So they drink it and then they turn into Aryans. And then the Kirkinator and George Droid, the cyborg version of George Floyd, take them to fly away to Agartha. I think the idea here is that this monster is supposed to be filled with Vril, and Vril is a life source that comes from the black sun that exists in the center of the earth, and I guess if you consume the Vril, you can turn into an Aryan. Apparently, there are two major cities in the center of the earth. You've got Agartha, which is lit by a golden sun, and then you've got Shambhala, which is lit by a black sun. It's pretty ironic that they don't want any black people in Agartha, but then the energy that they consume, which then allows them to go to Agartha, comes from a black sun. Black sun? Black sun. Shambhala's black sun is represented by this symbol, which is known as the Sonnenrad, which is a very common Nazi symbol. If you remember, a little while ago, there was a big controversy because Ron DeSantis put out a campaign ad which featured a Sonnenrad, which showed that there were some Nazis in his campaign staff. The Sonnenrad shows up in a bunch of these Agartha memes, like this picture of the K-pop Demon Hunters, which has a Sonnenrad behind them, or this meme where you've got Nazi Logan Paul, KSI Yakub, Ashtar Sharon, someone drinking Vril Monster Energy, which turns them into an Aryan, and then a Jewish Happy Merchant anti-Semite caricature up at the top. Thank you so much to whoever made this. I can literally feel my brain cells committing suicide. Speaking of suicide, you've got Nazi Logan Paul here. I guess it makes sense to have Logan Paul as a Nazi because, like, he went to the suicide forest and Hitler went to the suicide bunker, and then KSI is depicted as Yakub because in real life KSI has a very big forehead, which I actually do find pretty funny. For some reason, Yakub shows up in a lot of these Agartha memes. Yakub originates from the Nation of Islam. They believe that Yakub was a powerful black scientist who literally created white people. I assume that most of these far-right people would not like the idea that white people were created by a black man. They probably just think that Yakub is funny, or maybe they like to promote Yakub because the Nation of Islam also has a history of anti-Semitism just like they do. Then again, you've got this kid here with glowing blue eyes from the Vril monster. There has actually been a bit of a controversy in the Agartha community over whether or not they should be saying that monster can give you Vril, because according to some of them, the claw marks on the front of a monster can are actually 666 in Hebrew. So you think that when you're drinking the monster, it's going to turn you into an Aryan, but then, oh no, you actually turn into a Jewish devil. Ironically, this city that's depicted in the background actually isn't Agartha, even though it's the main city that is used in these Agartha memes. This city is actually called Hyperborea, and apparently it's a city that exists at the North Pole, which used to be inhabited by ancient Aryans. And if you zoom in, you can see in the background that there's this Nordic-looking angel, which is holding a swastika. Very cool. All right, let's look at one more Agartha meme. This one is AI generated. Whoa, we get anti-Semitic brain rot and AI slop all in one video? I don't know about you guys, but I'm having a great time. Okay, so at the start, you've got these Nazi soldiers sitting around drinking Vril Monster. Then you see some Nazi UFOs flying past the ice wall in Antarctica. Apparently, there are some legitimate conspiracy theories that Nazis were building UFOs UFOs during World War II, and then at the end of the war, some of them escaped and flew their UFOs to Agartha, and they still live there. Next, we see a shot of these Nazis fighting with these lizard people. I'm guessing that these lizards are meant to be Archons. I talked about this a little while ago in a video on my other channel, but Archons are supposedly alien lizard people who shapeshift into Jewish people. The idea of Archons was popularized by this dude named David Icke, who claims that there's a cabal of Jewish people who run society, but that they are actually secretly shapeshifting lizard people. So the Nazis are fighting with these lizard aliens, but then they walk up to this pyramid where there are these white aliens. I'm pretty sure that these aliens are meant to be Pleiadians, also known as Nordic aliens. If you didn't know, Nordic imagery like Nordic runes are very popular with Nazis. So I think the idea is that these Nordic Pleiadians are the good aliens which are trying to help the Aryans. And maybe Ashtar Sharon is like the king of the Pleiadians. So you've got a classic fight of good versus evil. You've got the good Nordic Pleiadian aliens and the Aryans fighting against the evil lizard Archon aliens and Jewish people. And the Aryans need to harness the Vril from Shambhala's Black Sun so they can use it to fight the Archons, aka Jewish people. Is all of this the stupidest shit you've ever heard in your entire life? Maybe, but just remember that a ton of Nazi leaders actually believed this shit. There was apparently a secret occult society of Nazis called the Thule Society where they actually believed in a bunch of this shit. It's pretty interesting that some of the people who accuse the left of being a cult support this cult of mystic Nazis. It's almost like a lot of the things that they said about Jewish people were actually projection. Kind of like how people on the right accuse people like Hillary Clinton of wanting to eat children and harness their adrenochrome, but then at the same time they support people like Peter Thiel, who literally gets infusions of child blood because he thinks it'll help him stay younger. Not saying I support Hillary Clinton or anything, although I do feel pretty bad for her if it turns out that her husband really was cheating on her by getting blown by Trump on Epstein's Island. It's pretty interesting that Trump and the Clintons were apparently both incredibly corrupt. It's almost like the main problem in society is the 1% in general and all of these incredibly corrupt rich people. Anyway, I think that's about enough for today. I can't help but admit that I do find some of these memes kind of funny and just how ridiculous they are, but I only find them funny if they're meant to be taken as satire. And I don't think that most of the people who create these memes are intending them to be satirical. I think they're meant to be meta-ironic in the sense that you can't exactly tell what is a joke and isn't a joke. And then if you act like you're offended by these memes, you just give them exactly what they want because they're trolls who enjoy pissing people off. But just remember, a lot of the Nazis that these far-right people look up to actually believed in all of this crazy shit. And maybe this is just my personal bias, but I think instead of us falling down weird rabbit holes about conspiracy theories about cities in the center of the earth and lizard aliens, maybe we could all instead just come together and give people healthcare. I don't know. Anyway, I hope that this video did not destroy your brain too much, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks for sticking around till the end of the video. It would mean the world to me if you would consider becoming a member of this channel or supporting me on Patreon. I've been releasing exclusive monthly videos for my members and my patrons. My last video was me giving my thoughts on AI, and I'm planning to release a new video in a week or so. Supporting me on there gives me the opportunity to be able to afford to take on riskier artistic endeavors. I'm currently working on a really big project for my other channel that I'm excited for you guys to see. But for now, thank you to my Godbeard level members, Bebo, Bridget Brave, Scaries, Novaj Ren, Woods Witch, and Kelly Wright.